closer to bringing those devices in. I want to reintroduce to you Robert Frisbee. He is our lead technology facilitator for instructional services. He has a road show that he is sharing with faculties at schools, advisory councils, and has some updated details that revolve around the importance of safety. Would you all like to come down and sit in the front? That's exactly what I was going to say.
Chairman Ron Hart, members of the board, Dr. Baldwin, and other stakeholders, I have been asked to give you an update on what we've been working on for the last month. But before I do that, I want to show you this video clip, which we have used as one of our models that we've been looking at to make this plan come into place. And we have visited other schools and looked at a lot of models like this that I want you to see before we get started.
Seek out information. If they want to know something, all they have to do is pick up their phone, and in 2 seconds, they know the information. And I think harnessing that in class is huge.
We came to the conclusion that we had to start with changing instruction. We started to focus on Web 2.0 integration into the classrooms, digital citizenship, and we wanted mobility. We wanted our kids to use mobile devices in their education setting.
People were already, trying to hide what they were doing on their cell phones or so by opening it up, we got more freedom and things moved a lot faster.
The biggest thing for me was the engagement. It was instant. We were learning figurative language and we were looking at lyrics from music and they became totally interested in words. They were really truly pulled into the learning.
What we wanted to do in Katie is to bring that anytime, anywhere access and put it inside the educational setting. So now that school day isn't limited from 7:30 to 3:30. That school day could extend for however long those kids need it to be.
Now let's work on policy projects.
One of the things I've been able to bring into the classroom is taking the information set and instead of presenting it in class, sending that part home as a videotaped lecture, as an internet-based presentation, having the students do that part as homework. And then in the classroom, you engage the students in discussion. You as a resource are available, standing at their shoulder, able to answer questions and interact with them with the content. What they need from us is interaction.
When I look at Web 2.0 and its impact on instruction, a couple things jump out at me very quickly. It's a collaborative space. It's an online space, the blogs and the wikis and the videos and the podcasts. This is what these kids do outside of school. And once we brought that into our curriculum, into our classrooms, that's where we saw it explode.
When I walk into a KDISD classroom now, I absolutely see the students are all working in groups. They have these devices out, and sometimes an individual student will have multiple devices on their desk because they're researching on one and actually putting in the information or videotaping on another one.
The project environment is open, it's collaborative. Now that we have open access to the internet, the projects are richer, they're more full, they're more real. They discover things that I never thought of.
When I first heard about the KD Technology Initiative, I was ecstatic, and I totally get, I mean, I've seen the teachers talking about the engagement, and that's so huge, and I see it in my kids. This is what grabs their attention, this is what makes learning fun for them.
Each of these kids at each of these levels, they're on the internet in some form or fashion. So we've incorporated in digital citizenship at each of these levels as appropriate. So by the time our kids graduate as seniors, they understand the appropriate use of technology, they understand the appropriate use of the internet, and they also understand what it means to live as a digital citizen responsibly. What we're offering in KDISD is a new way of instructing, a new way of allowing kids to learn in their own style with their own personal devices. This is the way they're going to live and operate for the rest of their lives, and we're helping prepare them for that, and that's exciting.
Now, I hope you noticed some of the things in there that we really look forward to as we move forward with this initiative, including the engagement that you saw and the collaboration and the ability for them to use different devices in the classroom. Those are some of the things that we hope to move forward and be able to do with our students as well. Now, for an update on where we are right now, what things that have happened in the last month, we'll start off with our Media and Technology Advisory Committee. Has talked about where we want to start with this. So the first phase of this, we are going to open BYOD in all the intermediate, middle, and high schools, and Weaverville Primary. Weaverville Primary Principal Brent Wise volunteered, or elementary, I'm sorry, volunteered to be a part of this pilot. So he was the only elementary school that wanted to get involved up front. We also have been working on a parent-student agreement form, and the biggest reason for coming up with this form is to deter theft early in this process. We are hoping that over time, this agreement form won't even have to exist because the biggest thing we've got to do here is educate our parents and our students to protect their devices by putting passwords on them and locking them. And that really deters the theft, and if the student knows they're going to take that device, that they can't get into it. So over time, as that school mentioned earlier, they're 3 years into this process, and all the models that we've looked at 3 years down the road The procedure is just what it is. Everybody understands what it is, and the theft issue really is not there anymore. We'll also have a registration process and procedure for that. We're thinking about adding a barcode or a QR code to that device. Most devices probably accept cell phones. Cell phones are less susceptible to theft because the majority of students and even individuals carry that device with them all the time. They don't lay it down anymore. So we're looking at a couple of scenarios there for that. We would be putting QR codes or barcodes on those that if they were to take them off, it would destroy the barcode, so they wouldn't be able to take those off and put them on another device. In that agreement too, we outline the responsibilities for the student and the parents and the staff. We have also updated our online safety resources to where everybody will have access to those. Communications has created a new safety or Safe Schools tab on the district website. And it looks like this. Under the, you see the tab up there at the top that says Safe Schools. We have added the online safety resources from NetSmarts. This is a free source from the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. And they create age-appropriate resources, videos, games, and teacher lesson plans that teachers can share with their students. All of that too now is part of the Common Core State Standards, K-12, so it has to be taught at some point in time during the K-12 learning environment. You'll see there that there's resources for parents, even the educators. Under the educators tab, there's lesson plans there. There's even a tab for law enforcement, teens, tweens, kids, and then the NetSmart 411, which is a help feature in which you can call an anonymous call to NetSmarts and of any issue that may be happening. There's also there, you'll see the NetSmart 5 monthly email update. NetSmart puts out a monthly newsletter that gives 5 features every month on online safety. And our goal is to put all of our student email and our faculty email in that database to where that everyone will be getting that newsletter every month, just as a reminder of online safety. Communications. Here's some of the things we've been doing. Our instructional technology facilitators have been going to faculty meetings, school improvement team meetings, advisory meetings, parent nights, and explaining what BYOD is, when it's coming, and what our implementation plan is. Our media coordinators and all of our media centers now have the resources that they can share. They have the information that they need. And they've also been starting a planning process on how we are going to take care of those students that don't have a device in the classrooms. For example, if a teacher decides to do a lab or a project, that we've got to make sure that every student has a device, and how we're going to manipulate the sharing of those devices in the school. We've got conversations going on right now about how to take care of that. And also our communications department is developing a community video that they'll be able to broadcast, put on the website, and several other communication features that they'll be working with to make sure we get the word out. We do have about 3 more weeks in which we've got to get all this taken care of, but I'm thinking we're going to be pretty much online with next week before spring break, especially to get this information out and get started the 1st of April. Our technology department has done some testing. They actually had the vendor come in that tested the wireless access points, and those are the little boxes you'll see in the ceiling, just like that one there in front of the screen. Those are the access points for the devices as they come in. The vendor actually came in and did some testing on that and made some adjustments to it, and they think we're ready to go. So we're going to be ready to go on April 3rd, 2013 with our first test and see how this goes. They also have been able to manage those access points, which means they will be able to turn a specific access point off, like that one right there, in any location in the district, to where they see that somebody may be abusing their privileges. They can immediately find that access point, which has an IP address, and they can turn that access point off if need be. Or in some situations, only turn certain ones on. So they have the ability to do that. Any questions about any of that? That's where we stand today.
I just wondered what type of training the teachers have had.
We have met with those at the faculty meetings and told them what they're responsible for, and we have given them a statement of use, which explains to them what their responsibilities are and what the students' responsibilities are. Our main focus here is to make sure the teacher understands they've got to protect the integrity of the teaching and learning environment. That device is just an enhancement tool. It's not the device that has to be used all the time. They're going to have to be responsible in their classroom as to when it's out, when it's not out, and then take care of the teaching and learning from that.
But they have professional development as far as how is to use the internet and the device in the classroom.
Yeah, we've been working on that for years, for the teachers. Our goal is there too, to help us to start getting our teachers to use more of those Web 2.0 tools and the things that they were talking about in that video. That's where we want to go.
What's been the reaction?
Very positive. Parents more positive than we anticipated. The biggest concern again is the theft of a device that they paid $500 or $1,000 for that they're going to bring in that environment. But you know, we've got to start somewhere and see where it goes. So we're going to take these 2 months and evaluate before the next school year starts.
Anyone else?
Is this something that will possibly work in conjunction with, we're looking at purchasing some device maybe for students in 3rd through 12th grade? We have both programs running simultaneously.
Yes, we do have capabilities of doing both at the same time, one-to-one and bring your own device. Yes. Because we're probably not looking at being able to provide one-to-one across the district because of budget reasons, but over time, yes. And just to give you an update on that, Dr. Fuchs has filled out the forms and submitted those to E-rate for a possibility of allowing the 6th and 7th graders the option of a one-to-one device, and we will be waiting on the state to get back with us with the results of that proposal.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
One thing that I failed to mention at the beginning of our meeting is Mr. Pat Bryant is ill tonight, so that's the reason he couldn't be with us. So, Ms. Blunt, do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
Lisa Baldwin?
Good evening. I just wanted to share some good news with the other board members and with the stakeholders. I received a phone call this week from the member of the Board of Trustees at the North Carolina School of Science and Math, and he had read about our STEM school plans and called the chancellor of the school, Dr. Roberts, and they both were very excited about our plans and want to help us. And they put me in touch with Melissa Tebow, who is the distance learning program coordinator, and they would love to offer some classes here in Buncombe County for students through the School of Math and Science. So I was very excited about that and just wanted to let everybody know. Right now they're doing this with Burke County schools. They're opening a STEM school next year as well. It's actually going to be in the School of the Deaf on that campus in Jeter Hall, where they're spending about $300,000 to renovate this underutilized school building. And they will be offering 9 courses there for their students from the School of Science and Math. So I hope that's something that we can take advantage of. And I look forward to bringing this to the STEM committee at the next meeting. And if you have any questions, please see me after the meeting.
Ms. Blunt?
That's all.
Okay. All right, we have 2 reports tonight. Mr. Thompson.
Dr. Baldwin, Mr. Reinhardt, and members of the board. I'm here to do just a very brief update from the Safe Schools Task Force. And actually, we have several members of the task force here tonight. I'm happy that they're here. Kevin Presley from the Sheriff's Department, Sherry Baldwin from the Sheriff's Department, Lieutenant Raby, Officer Fisher, Mr. Huff, and Dr. Adele is out, and I. We've been meeting regularly over the last couple of months, and will continue to do so for the next month or so. And we have taken a lot of time to carefully review our Safe Schools plan in Buncombe County. We'd like to reinforce to you guys that Buncombe County's plan is already a model for other schools, and far superior to many of the other plans that we've looked at across the state and across the nation. But when we get through with looking at some minor revisions that we're making and some recommendations that we'll bring to you next month, I believe that we will probably have the best Safe Schools plan of anywhere. We with an already strong plan, with the resources that we're looking at, collaborating with across the county, I believe we will have the best plan out there. We have carefully interviewed and collected data from over 30 community representatives that come from child serving agencies in the community, from law enforcement, from emergency services agencies, as well as mental health agencies. Many of these folks who came and talked with us are also parents of students in Buncombe County and spoke to us not only from their professional points of view, but also as parents. We are also going to, within the next week or so, do a phone and online parent survey to get additional input from parents related to their safety concerns. Last week, Dr. Adele, Lieutenant Ruby, Mr. Huff, and I participated in a parent meeting at Coons Intermediate regarding safety issues that parents may have. It was a great opportunity for us to get further parental input from that group of parents, very concerned and very cooperative and very willing and open to getting information. The task force will come back in April to make recommendations related to the 4 areas covered in our Safe Schools plan. Those are prevention and mitigation. They include things like our positive behavior intervention and supports program, our mental health in school services, educational programs such as anti-bullying programming. Those are the things that are part of prevention and mitigation, and we have a lot of this in place in Buncombe County schools. We'll also have recommendations about our preparedness, and this goes to our collaboration with our emergency management and our local police departments across the county and our sheriff's department in looking at our building and in looking at our multiple buildings and the needs there, and are we prepared, and do we have a good plan, and do people know what that plan is, and how are they trained? And looking at our response, how do we practice, and how do we drill, and how do we make sure that we have a quick response time and an appropriate response when there is a response needed? And last of all, but certainly not least of all, our recovery efforts. Recovery is probably the stage in a crisis that lasts the longest, because when the crisis is over, you have folks who are very sensitive to trauma, the impact of trauma on their lives, and it takes a while to recover from that. So what do we do on an ongoing basis to ensure that we have an appropriate recovery program? In all of these areas, we will present some ways where we can, by increasing our collaboration across agencies, to share our training, to look at our facility safety, to increase law enforcement presence in our schools, and to improve our response times. We will have specific recommendations to this, some of those which are immediately implementable and cost nothing, and some that over time may have some costs associated with them. I really have appreciated the opportunity to work on these issues with this particular team. They're very hardworking, very diligent, very knowledgeable, and we have learned a lot about our community and about the needs of our schools. And I'm anxious to bring those recommendations back to you next week, next month at your meeting.
Board members, any questions?
I have a quick question. As far as the school resource officers, is there a job description for them? Is there an outline of what their duties are that we could get a copy of?
Yes, there is a job description. In fact, I just got it from Lieutenant Ruby this week. We'd be glad to share it with you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mrs. Swanger?
Good evening again. We are going to share with you some information that you asked us to provide for world languages.
It's just a second to flip on the monitor.
And we have a copy of this PowerPoint for you to take with you as you're thinking about decision-making for the next school year. There it is. All right, thank you. First of all, to have some introductory comments, I wanted to mention that a world-class education is certainly the vision of our superintendent. Also, the name of a book that's been very helpful to us called A World-Class Education by Vivian Stewart. A lot of what we're presenting and looking forward comes from this resource, not only for technology, for what's happening inside the classroom, and what's happening around the world in languages. How do we begin this work and how do we accomplish all of the things that we want to do? We have to connect. We have to connect outside of Buncombe County, outside of our classrooms. And one such connection that we can start with and look at their prior work is the State Board of Education. There is a task force that you will see that our own Western North Carolina Board of Education, State Board of Education representative, Wayne McDevitt, now chairs. And he has given us the commitments of which we would like to share those with you this evening. The 5 commitments of the State Board of Education calls for robust and cutting-edge teacher support and tools. Our teachers have to have access and have resources to connect outside of their classrooms, not only technology-wise, but what kinds of applications, what kinds of world language opportunities, what kinds of global studies, because that is part of their evaluation instrument and is in the standard course of study. Our teachers have to have leading-edge language instruction. And I think it's very important to note that exposure to language is not language acquisition. And there are lots of programs out there, as we started researching, that merely is an exposure. So we have to decide as a community, what do we want our learners to have available to them? We know that one of the commitments would be for innovative schools, such as our STEM school, our early college. Commitment number 4 talks about district networking and partnerships, recognition of us being in the Global Schools Network that I'll mention in just a few minutes. And then relationships. What do we look at outside our strategic plan in Buncombe County, and how do we form those relationships with others? Language capacity certainly helps bring security and stability to the world, and I think that's something that every school district should be looking at as we grow our students. In our strategic plan, we have been exploring different languages, and we have many things already happening as each school does complete a global action plan for us, talking about the importance of global education in their school buildings. Some of our main partners for you to see would be the Global Schools Network, and I mentioned that earlier. We are one of 16 districts across the state of North Carolina participating in this state initiative. Worldview is a partner of ours that we send teachers to frequent professional development opportunities, from media specialists to classroom teachers. They really hone in on helping teachers know how to teach what's happening across the world. And then lastly, the Center for International Understanding. That's our partner that brings our Confucius classrooms to Buncombe County, teacher travel, teacher exchanges, especially with China and Denmark, and then our school-to-school partnerships. As you remember, we do have a partner school in China. Very important partners to help us grow this initiative. So tonight, Cynthia Lopez, who has been leading our global initiative, Leland Blankenship, who has been working with world language teachers in his secondary ed role. We're going to share our current status because we have to do a needs assessment before we move forward. We're going to talk a little bit about Spanish dual immersion, which has support and research behind it, and is certainly a way that we want to move Buncombe County schools. We've got some short-term goals and, of course, long-term goals.
As Director of Secondary Education, when we had a little bit of staffing change a few years ago, I assumed world languages. And they're a great group of teachers to work with, and their students too. They really are good teachers. They're innovative with practice. They integrate technology. They're wonderful to work with. One of the reasons as secondary director I didn't go too far out of my league there was because that's it for the elementary program right now. We've got a full immersion program at Glen Arden Elementary School, and we started it 2 years ago, and it is doing really great things. It is a unique program to that school, but when you look at the progression down through those bullets, you can see how a full immersion program starts. We're now in its second year, therefore it's a kindergarten and first grade. You sort of grow as the cohort moves up the school. Next year it'll be a K-2 program, and so forth. So another few years down the road, it's going to impact those students who are going to show up at intermediate school, and then middle school, and then high school with a preparation in that language, unlike what we've seen before. So it does have an impact at the secondary level, but this is a unique program, and it's really doing a good job out there, and they're excited about it. Next thing I need to talk to you about is our intermediate schools. And that stair step was not by design, that's just the way it is right now. But we have got plans for moving forward. You'll see North Windy Ridge flat. We don't have a Spanish teacher right now spending time at North Windy Ridge, but the administration, they've got plans to move forward with that, and that's part of our short-term goals that we're looking at there. But the one thing I wanted to explain more so on this slide was the difference between exposure and an exploratory program. Not only is Evelyn larger, but that's not really why you see the numbers so large at Evelyn compared to Coons. The difference is the type of programs. At Coons, it's an exposure program, very much like you'd see in any elementary unified arts, 45 minutes once a week. That's just exposure. That's all you're going to get at that level. The program at Coons, though, they're trying a different model, more similar to what you would see at a middle school, where those students have 45 minutes per day, every day, for 9 weeks. And then they rotate on a wheel to other unified arts programs. So that's the difference between exposure and exploratory. Both of those situations are being done with 1/2 of one position that was pulled from the partner middle school. Coons, of course, from Valley Springs, and Evan from Northern Middle. So same amount of position, touching a lot of different kids, but the type of contact's a lot different. Then when we look at middle school, and this is enrollment, if you really look at those blocks, and we'll see another slide in just a few minutes to talk about staffing, the enrollment pair follows the staffing. You got a full position, you're going to touch more kids. And our middle schools are somewhat, they're pretty similar as far as the types of programs that they have, except for the opportunity for high school Spanish at 3 of our middle schools, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Now let's look at Spanish 1. That's our next slide. That is high school Spanish 1. It has been an opportunity for middle school students to earn high school credit in world language for a number of years. We have it at 3 of our middle schools. A school has to dedicate a teacher. Those students, they're not in a quill type situation anymore. They have to be in there the same number of hours or close to it that they would be in a high school class. So the minimum there is 135 hours. Mostly that's accomplished through 45 minutes a year long at our middle schools. That's the way we're doing it there. Just 3 right now, but again, in our goals, you'll see something different there. So now you look at the staffing, and again, if we flip back and forth between staffing and enrollment, you would see a direct correlation between staffing and enrollment. Now, let's look at our high schools, and particularly in Chinese. Our Chinese program has been our fastest growing program over the last few years. And you can see there, we've really got quite a bit of enrollment at particular schools. Again, enrollment follows staffing, excuse me. Some of our schools, when we look at the slide for staffing of those positions, but for example, Reynolds has a full-time person. Early college right next beside it shares a person with Inca High School. So your enrollment follows that. Middle college and community are that do not have a Chinese program there. You will notice that the Owen the Owen enrollment is slightly lower than the other schools. They have a half position like the other schools that are also smaller than the full-time enrollment. But that teacher also spends part of his day at Owen Middle School. So that's why you see a slightly different enrollment at Owen High School. Here's another language that's very popular. It's French. But again, you can see the difference in enrollment, different schools. Some schools don't offer French at all. None is one of the Romance languages. In some schools, again, a lot driven on student demand. That's where the enrollment comes in a language like this. Latin, only offered at 3 of our schools. Latin is, there are people who would argue, do you really need to still teach Latin? Should you have it, should you not? And you could argue either side of the coin, quite frankly. But our Latin programs are really pretty strong. And Reynolds has a brand new teacher, and I think that teacher is really aggressively growing that program. I know Inca's teacher, I think he's been there, this may be his first year, and that program has really grown. A whole lot has to do with the teacher and elective courses like this. And Spanish, our most popular world language course at the high school level, and really, with the exception of Owen, the only course we offer at middle school. You can see quite a bit of enrollment in that program across the district. Now, if you look at all of our district, all of our courses combined into different languages, you can see there how we're represented and how Spanish is really dominant in our language offerings and enrollment. And that's not anything that we wouldn't expect. A very useful language, a very practical language for our students, as well as meeting those university admission requirements. NCVPS, while the numbers are small, and that makes the chart look a little bit disproportional there, but even the one with the top enrollment there, it's less than 25 students enrolled in world languages right now through NCVPS. But we do have some students taking some languages through distance learning.
Do you know how many different languages those students are taking? Oh, sorry.
It's quite a few, but
yeah.
there are some missing as far as an AP offerings. That'll surprise you, and it varies by year. So I've actually got a chart on what's offered this coming fall.
Okay.
Okay. And then AP Tech. One of the things that, if you would flip back and forth between the last 2 slides, early college and middle college, they don't use NCVPS, but they have AP Tech right there that does offer some language courses. So we got some enrollment there. And we do have one student at Robertson taking an AP Tech for language course. Okay, now if you look at all of them across the board, we've really got quite a few students enrolled in world languages right now at the high school level. If you totaled all of those up, you'd come up with 3,689 students taking world languages in our schools right now. So we've got quite a few offerings, and that's in the standard enrollment pattern right there. And then our staff positions, you can see where they are and how many we've got dedicated to each one. Robertson has quite a few teaching positions dedicated to world language. Now we'll talk about a few concerns with where we are right now. Not taught in the elementary program except for that one full immersion program at Glen Art. But then we're looking at that in our adults. Not really consistent in our intermediate schools, again being addressed in our short-term goals. So we want to provide more consistency from that. But also we want to learn from the current models in place. We've got the two models in intermediate school in place right now. One for exposure, one for exploratory. So we'll bring those administrators together to talk about what would be the ideal schedule for world language in intermediate school. And then the opportunity to earn high school credits not available at every middle school. That's something we really want to rectify in the very near future. As a comment that Dr. Fuchs often makes when he refers to technology, it only takes money. It's staffing. I mean, it really is. You can't have a teacher there for a half a year and offer a year-long course. It doesn't work out. Again, some inconsistency at the high school, but staffing decisions are complex, and that's, I said that about it only takes money, but it's really a complex issue. Dr. Baldwin knows from building his schedule and personnel, the same money, the same funding that you can hire a world language teacher with, you can hire a math teacher, you can hire a social studies teacher. Those two areas in particular have just ramped up graduation requirements in the last 5 years. So it's not an easy decision on where you're going to dedicate. And the patterns that we see, one thing I really need to emphasize, is the patterns that we see at middle school and at high school, those have been actually driven by student interest and student demand. If they've got a lot of sign up for it, then that helps when the principal has the opportunity to hire on what to do with those positions. So student interest and demand have helped shape where the world languages are more better staffed now. Central office doesn't have a curriculum specialist for world language. I like working with these folks, but to be honest, they would be better served by someone that knew this curriculum and that could support them. I've got un pico, that's a little bit of Spanish, and it was taught by a guy from Graham County. So, but I do like these folks. They're great to work with. They're really good teachers. Here's the course offerings available. This is the great equalizer, is what I would call that. These are all the world languages taught through NCBPS. NCBPS is not cheap, but it is the only currently approved distance learning provider in North Carolina for first-time credit. You can use somebody else for credit recovery, but for first-time credit, that's the only game in town currently approved. You see a wide variety of offerings there, but under AP, it was interesting that they did not have AP Spanish. We would have some students interested in AP Spanish through NCBPS if it's offered. But this is this coming year's offerings. That changes year to year, and part of that is the availability of teachers. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to talk about dual immersion. Ms. Longer mentioned that early on, and I think the first thing I need to do is explain to you how that is different than what we're doing currently at Glenarden Elementary. You saw last year the presentation when we had the teacher come and with the aid of her kindergarten students. That is a full immersion program. It is supported by a company. The name of the company is BIF, and you'll see them probably again through the presentation. That it stands for Visiting International Faculty, and we pay a fee to that company, and they help us recruit the teacher, and they support our program. They actually have experts in the area of immersion who travel up here periodically. They provide staff development for the teachers that we hire through that program, and they design the program. And so what we have, and it's the term SPLASH, if you've heard that, what we have at Glenarden is called SPLASH. Well, what we're talking about now is dual immersion, and it can be in any language. We're talking currently about doing it in Spanish, but it's different because it's not all day true immersion. It's 50-50 at a minimum. It can be more than 50-50, especially in the first year. It is similar in that it starts in kindergarten, and students start in kindergarten and follow the same cohort all through that school level. So it is like full immersion in that way. The other difference, though, which is key, is that for dual immersion to really be true dual immersion, you need to have a significant number of students in the target language. So in our case, if we're looking at doing Spanish immersion, we need to have about 50% of the children in that classroom who are from Spanish-speaking homes. Now, half have to be from English-speaking homes. And it doesn't have to exactly be half, but that is the recommendation, to have a true dual immersion program. But basically, it's just not as extensive a program as full immersion. So this year, we've been working on dual immersion. And one reason is because North Carolina paid some experts from George Mason University to come to North Carolina and look at some of the programs that were in place. And the research from those folks, their names are Wayne Thomas and Virginia Collier, it is really astonishing. It is great research, and North Carolina kind of presented that to all school systems last year, and they're encouraging us to pursue this where we can. And so we formed a committee. That committee started working early this school year, and we invited the schools that had that significant Spanish or Hispanic population, Spanish-speaking or Hispanic population, and we invited them to be a part of it. We went in different groups and visited 4 different counties in North Carolina to see their programs, and we spent the day there, talked to their folks about what was going on. And there are, you know, I will say, I can't, Mr. Bain is here, she helped us, Ms. Nunez is here. We really saw some cool things that are going on that we would like to see for our kids. So our plans are for the next school year, Avery's Creek Elementary and Oakley Elementary are planning to implement dual immersion programs. They will be in Spanish. Right now, the schools plan to have 2 tracks per grade level. So meaning next year in kindergarten, if they have sufficient interest, they are going to have, so for example, I think Avery's Creek has 7 kindergartens. Out of that 7, 2 will be dual immersion. And half of the day the students will spend learning regular kindergarten curriculum in Spanish, and the other half they will be learning it in English. And then most likely the students will flip-flop. They'll have 2 teachers, one who is the Spanish teacher, one is the teacher in English, and they'll flip-flop. But these are teachers who are regular kindergarten teachers and are certified to teach kindergarten. 2 other schools that are interested and have pretty much signed on for the next year are Emma Elementary and Williams Elementary, and we have some other schools that are looking at it. And also let me say that Avery's Creek and Oakley, what they are doing and what they have done is they have presented plans to us about how they're going to implement this. They have met with their school improvement teams, they've met with their faculty, and they're now talking to parents. It's now time for outreach to see how many of our parents are interested in this, and you know which families are interested in being in this program. And so that's where they are currently. I talked about Thomas and Collier, and I have a book here, and if you would like to borrow this from me and read it, I mean, I think you will find it fascinating. Not having an education background, some of the terminology I had to ask someone about or look up, but it was very exciting for me to read because it makes a lot of sense. What the research shows is that all students benefit from dual immersion. And Ms. Nunez just sent me an article from the Wall Street Journal about how bilingual education kind of just increases that brain power. It is higher level learning. And so that's what these folks are saying. Those students who are learning their content in 2 different languages at one time, their brains have to work a little bit harder. And the benefit of that pays off for them in the long term. But the research from Thomas and Collier shows that all student groups, white, African American, Hispanic, low socioeconomic, special ed, any student group that is placed in a dual language program, they outperform their peers who are not in the dual language program. So it narrows the achievement gap. It reduces the need for ESL services because many of the students who are in these programs would be getting extensive ESL services, but because they're learning English in the classroom, they don't need it. The other thing that Thomas and Collier point out is that there's a lot of peer learning going on. Because if you have, one half of the class, half of the day, the Spanish-speaking kids are the experts. And so the kids are learning together, and the kids who come from Spanish-speaking homes, they get to explain everything. They get to help their peers. And then the other half of the day, the English-speaking kids are the experts. And so they help each other learn. And that's a significant reason that you're seeing the kind of results that you are. But benefits, the Spanish speakers become truly proficient in their own language, Spanish, as well as becoming proficient in English, and that native English speakers also become proficient in a second language. FLES means foreign language in the elementary school. It requires 90 minutes of instruction per week in order to build proficiency. That is a hardship, and Mr. Blankenship talked about that when he's talking about exploratory versus Spanish that allows you to gain proficiency. So when you don't have the 90 minutes, the research is saying you're being exposed to it, but this is not something you're going to be able to build on and become truly fluent in that language. Well, the great thing about dual immersion is that you are getting that 90 minutes per week, and so the students can build proficiency. These are some of the results from Thomas and Collier. They show that, these are from North Carolina actually, that these are 2009 EOC results, that children that were not in dual language and children who were in dual language program reading scores, the dual language children across the state in the areas where they have these programs outperform the non-dual language students. And then also the same result in math. And then this is a quote from Thomas and Collier. After being in North Carolina, they said, we have analyzed over 6.2 million student records, and we're finding the same result. No matter where we go in the United States, we are seeing that dual language immersion improves test scores for students across the board. From a cost standpoint, there are benefits to dual immersion as well. One, you don't need additional staff in the school because we're going to hire that 7th kindergarten teacher at Avery's Creek Elementary anyway. We would just hire a teacher who is bilingual and biliterate in Spanish to teach the same content. So we don't have to hire an additional teacher. Staff development costs are not excessive, and one of the things that we have in the works right now is that we're working with a couple of other school systems in Western North Carolina through our RESA, and we are bringing a nationally known expert to Western North Carolina this summer. It's going to cost us about $4,000, but we will be able to train our staff members from Avery's Creek and Oakley in dual immersion. And then classroom materials. That is an additional expense that we will have up front because we don't currently have all the same materials in Spanish. But once we go through a whole school, we start kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd on up, and we buy those materials every year, we will then have the core materials. I mean, certainly we would have to update them as we would any materials, but it's just a one-time expenditure, basically. So, given that, our short-term goals, and by short-term, we're talking about things that we think are attainable, and attainable without a lot of money that we don't have. One is to expand immersion. We would like to expand full immersion also, but right now we have concrete plans, as you can see, to have dual immersion. And our short-term goal is to have it available at least in all 6 of our districts. Next year we will have it only in 2 districts, the Robertson district and the Reynolds district. And so we are working on getting every district involved. As Mr. Blankenship talked about, equity among all our intermediate schools. Right now, 2 of our intermediate schools have half a Spanish teacher, and not half a person, but a part-time position. And we have plans next year to have that also available to the students at North Windy Ridge. This one we really struggle with, all our middle school students able to obtain credit for high school Spanish. we would have to have a full-time position at each middle school, which we do not currently have. Now, as personnel director, I will tell you that all of our middle schools are equitably allotted positions, but over the years, the schools have chosen to use them in different ways. So one of the schools that may only have half-time Spanish may offer drama, whereas the school that has full-time Spanish does not. And so taking care of that without a new position at each school is going to take some time. And so we have talked about a 3-year phase-in. We're going to give you a cost sheet at the end of the presentation that you can take home with you and think about. I mean, we could do it immediately, but we would have to have an additional one-half position at all 7 of our middle schools to do that. And then equity in language availability at all high schools. And that is accomplished, like Mr. Blankenship said, through the virtual public school, we believe. That we have German right now at Irwin High School. We would like for all students to be able to take German if they so desire, depending, regardless of which high school you go to. Staffing-wise, that would be difficult to do, but through distance learning opportunities or the North Carolina Virtual Public School, we can do that. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Swan.
Cynthia's going to give you a sheet of some of the estimated costs of a world language program that revolves around elementary all the way through high school. On your sheets, you will see that the costs associated with the expansion of world language programs, if you look at number 1, for example, LESS, as she mentioned, stands for Foreign Language in Elementary Schools. From the research that we have conducted and the groups that we've spoken with, we would look at having a language program in elementary that would look something like art, music, and be equitable. Right now, we have 16 art teachers and 16 music teachers in our elementary programs, so we would need 16 foreign language teachers to offer that as a full-out kind of class in our elementary schools. However, there's no way that it could be a 90-minute block of time. It just won't work scheduling. Most of our art and music classes are either 30 or 45 minutes weekly. So that is not true. That time allotted will not gain us true acquisition, but it would certainly move forward. Might be a recommendation to take a teaching position and then have some kind of software inside the classroom or a computer lab to supplement that teaching while students are learning that language. And the cost of that you can see as about $900,000, this is our estimate. If we continue to offer programs such as Splash, that full immersion, 100% of our teaching is in another language. We have contracted through Visiting International Faculty, we call them BIF. They provide professional development, they come in and help with coaching, they make sure that lessons are moving accordingly to the patterns of the standard course of study. It does not include the cost of the teacher. The charge for that service is $44,500 per year. And that is not what we're paying for Glen Arden. We have a much lower rate that we're paying there, but this is their charge as they have realigned their company and their new request. To achieve equity in our middle schools, again, that immediate fix would be to add a half a position to each of those schools, and that's about $200,000. Again, middle school principals have used their same allotted positions in a fair and equitable manner, but they've used it on student interest or teacher or the wheel that they offer. So they all have the same numbers of positions. However, they've chosen to either have drama or Spanish or one of those kinds of things instead of a very everyone having the same offerings. And that's something that we as a system, as you will recall in our strategic plan, we want to make sure that if you're a student at Irwin, you have the same opportunities as you have at Owen or at North Buncombe as well. So that's something that we're working on as a district. It's important to have that consistency. The more we engage in growing world language programs, someone has to be in charge of it. Someone has to go out and model and work with teachers, make sure that professional development is offered. If we are going to grow this, it would be helpful that we could have someone that would be able to coordinate, and then possibly we could grow our own program and not have to use services from visiting international faculty. So that would be the long-range goal there. And then dual immersion, as Cynthia said, it's a very reasonable startup. We have purchased materials for Glenarden kindergarten and first grade classrooms, and we spend about $12,000 to get the materials for that classroom, one-time cost. And then, again, professional development is necessary because it is a different way of teaching, and teachers have to be very comfortable with their own language skills and their own, especially the writing skills. And the parents have to be comfortable with that before we can move forward. So those are some projected costs for you to think about as you are working towards the budget process, and hopefully that will be helpful to you in your decision making.
Board members, questions? Ms. Churchill?
I was just wondering if, since you said you have half positions, is it possible within our district to do an online teaching where you may have the Spanish teacher at Edlin Middle, but for technology purposes, we could have a group of kids in a room at Kuntz being taught by the same teacher?
Well, last month, if you saw the Mondo board presentation, that's something we would like to use the Mondo for after that's purchased. We do not have all of the real-time distance capabilities to do that right now. Our way to have distance learning is through North Carolina Virtual Public High School, but we are wanting to grow in that area. We also would like to, well, the state is actually looking at starting with middle school and up having online class experiences. So I think you will see that growing. We have to think about having a place for students to be and having computer access. You can't just send them away from the regular ed teacher. Someone's got to facilitate. In the high schools, we have distance learning coordinators, and they are non-certified positions, but they do all of the facilitation and making sure that students have the resources they need. Their online is working, capabilities are in place, they have their materials, and they work through their course segments.
So it would be possible then to have a non-certified person?
Yes.
And so still have the certified individual here?
The certified would be their teacher, and then they would go into a distance lab and connect to another classroom.
Mr. Craig?
You said the North Carolina Virtual Public School was expensive. I mean, how does that funding work?
I'll let you.
We're required to pay so much.
Yeah. It used to be a great plan, okay? They revamped it a couple of years ago with a different formula, and I've had some interesting discussions in the way I see it, the way they see it, a couple of different things. But it's basically a formula that is based on your previous year's enrollment. Now, they will tell you that there is a buffer built in. I think they call it a reserve that we're charged for. And you can enroll students above your allotment using the reserve, as long as that reserve is there. The problem is the bill comes next year because they actually, Ms. Parker, help me if I get this wrong, but I call it a cut or whatever, it's a negative. You will be deducted from your regular state allotment for your NCVPS services based on a pretty complicated formula, but the root of it is your enrollment from the previous year. I mean, I wish they'd just charge us for who's enrolled right now. That would make sense to me, but.
So we get allotted per student a certain
We do.
amount?
We have a certain number of students that we can calculate out that we won't be bumping it up for the next year. But we're already looking at it in our budget discussions. Since NCVPS changed their funding formula, and they've undergone quite a few changes down there. Since they have done that, we have our participation is not as strong as it once was, and we were really sort of hit in both ways with the NCVPS program, their funding formula, and all of a sudden becoming much more expensive and still being the loan provider approved by the state. At the same time, Career and College Promise changed our distance learning program with AV Tech, changed some of the eligibility requirements there. So our distance learning program has been struggling with those new formulas, but we were already talking in our budget discussions this year about building into the budget to get back stronger NCDPS participation because it's necessary. I don't know exactly where the state is going to go. NCDPS actually has authority to approve any other vendor for distance learning. And I've told this straight to their face. To me, that's sort of a conflict of interest that you have the authority to approve your competitor.
Right.
I would like that deal, but that's sort of the way it is. Our new governor, in one of his early speeches, and I don't remember who he was addressing it, where it was from, but he was very much interested in looking at expanding the opportunities for distance learning in our schools. So I don't know where that will go. It may go into a very positive manner to create a little more competitive environment for that funding. But they are good programs. They're strong programs. Where they want to retain the authority to approve those programs, it truly is a strong learning environment for the students and quality learning. It's not just working on a computer, clicking on multiple choice answers, and it all being computer graded. There are licensed teachers that truly do teach the courses. So I'm not trying to downgrade them in that regard. And that's why they have the statutory authority to approve, is to make sure that we don't just get into an online program that is not quality, that is not teacher-led in that regard.
Anyone?
Well, I was going to ask, I think Bob heard a presentation by Rosetta Stone where you can, for around $69 per kid, they can use a computer and learn a language.
Yes, that's one of the two companies that we're investigating. We are also in the process of looking at our elementary success maker labs, and we have a task force that's meeting, and we'll be providing recommendations to how we grow our labs. Do we continue with a reading and math kind of lab situation, or do we change to have some other computer software available in our labs, such as a language software? Again, that's exposure, and it would have to be, is that the board's pleasure for us to move forward in providing exposure? Are we trying to get to language acquisition or exposure, or a combination? A hybrid model of having a teacher and software seems to me to be ideal.
All right.
I was wondering about funding, now that the lottery money, I believe, could be used for technology. For example, we had talked at one time about checking with our legislators to see if the Article 39 sales tax that we receive every year could be made more flexible. I don't know if we've gotten anywhere with that as far as the Article 39 sales tax to help.
Well, we don't have the flexibility with lottery money at this point, but there's a little talk going on about that may be a possibility in the future.
And even if that's approved, I'm not sure, but I think that is to purchase hardware rather than services like this, like NCDPS is more of a service.
It's Article 39.
Yes.
Let me make sure so we don't have any misunderstandings. Currently, our Article 39 funds, I want to make sure that the board understands that on an annual basis, every penny of that Article 39 fund that is coming in as revenue goes toward debt service. There is not an overflow of what's coming in as revenue. We do have I'm going to use the term bank, probably shouldn't, Ms. Parker, but a bank of undesignated 39 funding that has been built up. But we can't mistake that for the revenue that comes in from Article 39, because that is used. That is our primary 99% funding that we use toward debt service of previous COPS and bonds. And I think that is absolutely essential that we understand that when we start talking about Article 39.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, Dr. Baldwin.
You've heard me say this before, and I think it's part of what will come as we have our budget workshop and budget presentation, and we start looking at numbers. But you know, this is clearly one of the 3 initiatives that we've identified. But I can tell you as superintendent what I believe in terms of the importance of moving this school system in terms of global education. It is painfully slow. I think we can make major progress, but we've all got to understand that there are dollar figures involved. There are personnel involved. We can move in that direction, but we're going to have a clear signal, and we all have to understand if we move in that direction of putting significant funding in something like foreign language at the world language, excuse me, don't anybody throw stones at me. World language at the elementary level. Let's face it, if we're going to get serious about preparing our kids in terms of global education, it's got to start at the elementary school. We can't wait to high school and look at virtual labs if we're truly going to prepare them. But it's going to cost money. We can find that, but we all have to understand there will be sacrifices. Something will have to give. This is a budget that is based 85% on staffing. Everyone has heard me year after year since 08-09 that we have hit that point where it is staffing. Support staffing, certified staffing, but the decisions are there. I think we have to, as a system and this board, we've got to determine what are those priorities? What are those priorities? Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. All right. Moving on to the action agenda. Do I have a motion to approve budget amendment number 4?
I move we approve budget amendment number 4.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions?
I had a question about the allocation of extra transportation funds. I don't know, or Mr. Martin, I guess what I'm curious about, is that due to the rising cost of fuel that?
The history of that is when the state budget was initially adopted, the General Assembly gave the Department of Public Instruction the equivalent of 1.2% extra money to fund a raise. Statewide among teachers, a 1% salary increase can be given without any impact on the state public school fund budget at all. And in October, in the finance forum, I'm one of the members of that, and we asked Philip Price if that money could be used for transportation to help out with the diesel fuel. And I'm sure Mr. Huff is intimately familiar with how much they allot for transportation versus how much it actually costs per gallon of fuel, but it's a fraction of what fuel actually costs. And Mr. Price heard our plea, and it's taken some months, but finally that extra money that was not needed for anything else was allocated for the fuel costs and transportation. So that's the history of how that came about.
And I do know transportation is looking at ways to free up more dollars as far as doing some sort of 2-tier or 3-tier busing. I don't know if anybody's investigating that possibility, whereas the other school districts have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And I believe this is something that we had discussed as a board before you came on.
I have looked over the what has been investigated in that, and with the data that I've seen so far, the tiering system really doesn't work very well for the mountains for various reasons, and I think they've been discussed in something that was presented by the former last director, Harold Laughlin, at the time. And if I need to discuss those further, I can do that at a later time. One of the things, though, as I mentioned earlier, with the possibility of live GPS, some of those cost savings would happen through live GPS. When you talk about the idling and things of that nature, that's as I've looked at the data with the tiering system in the past and saw what the results of that study was, I see the live GPS as a good alternative to that. And like I said, I'm very excited and looking forward to the study that we got coming up in April and May to see if, in fact, what this pilot is going to do and what they say it'll say will actually do it. We've got data on paper right now, as I've given them, the cost of fuel per gallon, and they can put it in their formula and say, well, this is what we expect you to say. Well, that's all on paper. The live GPS will give us a chance to look at empirical data to say, yes, what you say is true. So I'm looking forward to June to be able to tell you that this live GPS is a good avenue to go for that.
Yeah, that sounds great. I don't know if more densely populated districts like Robertson, for example, might be a candidate for tiered busing. Is that a possibility to look at that, just to stagger the start times?
Like I said, I briefly looked over that data. That's something I can come back to you with. Look at it further.
And we'll probably talk about this at the budget work session.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. Next on the action agenda, early middle college calendar for 2013-14. Do I have a motion to approve the calendar?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I had a question just about the start date. I believe it's August 15th. Is that to align with the AB Tech schedule?
Yes, ma'am, it is. They start 4 days earlier, and then the schedule will allow those 4 days to be made up later when spring break occurs.
Okay, so I know it looked like they're on the same spring break as us, but will there be another spring break for AB Tech too?
Yes, and simply because, and I'll ask Ms. Johnson to come forward and tell you a little bit about what they've done, because it is a little bit unique because of our calendar spring break and AB Tech spring break not being aligned any longer. And students who are taking college courses will certainly need to attend AB Tech when they're in session instead of being on spring break. Ms. Johnson, you want to talk about how you've informed the parents and worked with the groups?
Yes, our calendar was approved by both our parent groups and our staff as well. And it is a very unusual looking calendar. It doesn't look quite unusual that we start 4 days early so that we can align and our students can start their college classes. It just looks unusual because we make up those 4 days very close to our spring break. But our kids are in a dilemma because from the time they start on our campus as ninth graders, they immediately enroll in both high school classes and college classes. So there isn't a time that our students don't have to fall under both calendars. And we unfortunately were not able to align with the AB Tech calendar for spring break, which then just becomes very complicated as far as trying to get transportation, and mostly because our students are very conscientious and we want them to attend both college and high school classes, and they want to do so as well. And we feel that this calendar will allow us, by taking the 4 days we start early and putting 4 of those days when AB Tech has chosen to do a spring break, that will allow us to have our kids have at least one spring break. We could not solve the problem of, we do have many families that have students at our schools that are in the other schools as well, and we could not coordinate those schedules, but we feel that this is the best compromise.
Any other questions or discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda, we have the minutes from the February 7th, 2013 work session, open session, and closed session. We have the personnel report, student transfers and releases for both 2012-13 and 2013-14. We have the intent to purchase door access control systems. And then I'm not going to read all these policies, but we have Series 1000, Series 4000, and Series 6000 board policies. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Information agenda. We have some more policies for first reading, the Series 1000, Series 4000. We also have an administrative regulation and then some supplemental information on Budget Amendment number 4. Are there any questions at this time on the first reading of these policies or comments? Okay. Moving on to board directives. I would like to make a motion that we direct the administration to draft a policy for board consideration regarding media statements and board member interaction with the school district staff. Is there a second?
You
I'll second that.
Okay. I'll make one comment and open it up for any questions or discussion. I put this together, and as you know, we've had some discussions about media statements, board member interaction with the school staff, and some things that have come up over the past few months. And what I would like, and I think that the board is of course going to have to be very involved in making this policy, drafting this policy, is that we make it very clear how we're going to communicate as a board, how the system administration is going to interact with the board, and how we as board members are going to interact with school staff, in regards to general interaction, and also how we deal with the media and statements that come from the administration and from this board. So that was my intent. If anybody has any questions or comments they'd like to make at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I'd actually like to make a motion that we include how the interaction is with board members and public and other board members be included in this directive.
Okay. So you want to change the directive to include, to amend? Can I just not agree to the, or that we?
Give it a second.
Okay, okay. So the amend the directive to, once again, include?
Include interaction with public and other board members.
Okay. Okay, we have the amendment. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any questions or discussion?
I have some questions. I didn't know if this part of this piece is going to be incorporating the procedures that were developed last summer for board members asking questions of central office staff. Will that be incorporated into this policy? Is that the thought?
Well, I think it's certainly something we can discuss. And, once we kind of get a recommendation from the staff and we sit down, I think this is something that we're probably going to have to sit down and have a work session and kind of figure out how we're going to handle this as a board. And while it's technically a directive to the staff, I mean, we're certainly going to have to be intimately involved in this.
Yeah, I guess I also am curious, we did pass a board policy, I didn't have a chance to look it up, that did talk a little bit about the media and about the board chair, I believe, was part of that piece.
Yeah, it was that officially the board chair is the spokesman for the entire board.
So I didn't know if this was really necessary.
Not that that's fun sometimes, but. Or that I do a very good job of it.
I guess my concern is that this could impede the First Amendment rights of the board members to have freedom of speech. And I would just be very cautious about pursuing this for that reason.
Okay, duly noted. Anyone else? All in favor, please signify by.
Vote on the amendment first.
I'm sorry. And we're voting on the amendment. Is there, all in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, All right, going back to the original. Oh, any opposed?
To the amendment.
To the amendment?
Still thinking.
Okay, now you can move to-
Okay, I believe that's,
Could I ask a point of clarification? Is that? My
Yes.
attorney's saying yes, and my board chair hasn't said anything, so I'm waiting.
She can
I'm
ask
waiting to
for
see what you say.
clarification.
How are you gonna know unless I do? This, your motion is a directive to administration to advise us to do, about whatever it was you said right there, is that correct?
yeah, to draft the policy.
Okay, and
to-
then the amendment was to add whatever it was Amy said, is that correct?
That's correct.
So
To
we're
the
voting
original.
on the amendment.
We're voting on
See,
the
aren't you glad you
original
allowed me?
board directive with the addition from Ms. Churchill. That's
Yeah,
that's what we're voting on
What
now.
I think I'm having a problem is that these are two very different topics in one board directive. And I don't know the proper parliamentary procedure, but it looks to me like it needs to be two motions. That the media statements are one totally different topic than how board members interact with staff and with.
Well, I mean,
each
they can be
other.
separate policies,
But all we're doing
but we're just,
is asking.
we're asking at this point. They don't have to be one big policy. They can be separate policies. So,
If the motions were to fail, then someone could restate the motions in another way. And Mr. Chairman, just given the questions, I think it's probably prudent for you to take another vote on the amendment and then the main motion.
okay. All right, we'll back up and punt. All right, to the amendment, Ms. Churchill's amendment. Ms. Churchill.
I amend that we include, or I make a motion that we amend to include public and other board members in the policy for interaction concerning board members.
Okay. All right, one more time for Connie, for Ms. Jackson.
You got me, okay.
You're giving me another chance to use better grammar, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I would like to make a motion that we include in this policy for board consideration interaction between board members and the public, our constituents, and other board members.
So basically how we as official board members deal with the public and each other.
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have any discussion before we vote again?
And I suppose, you know, I said my concerns were with the First Amendment rights of our board. But this policy could just clarify that, you know, that we are able to all speak to the media. So I can see how this could work.
Okay, any other discussion? So again, yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I have a question when we're talking about discussing things with the media. Are we discussing them, talking with the media as a board member or as an individual?
Well, those will be things that we'll need to address.
I can address that. Again, the directive is for the administration to see what thoughts they have. That's all this is what thoughts they have. And then as the chairman has said, it will come back to you for further consideration. And as always, we'll be talking to the administration about First Amendment and other concerns. And we'll also help the administration make sure that it's not duplicative of other policies. Because I agree with Ms. Baldwin, we don't want to plow turf that we've already plowed. But we'll keep an eye on the First Amendment, and it'll just come back to you from the administration with some thoughts and some recommendations.
All right, so everyone, we're voting on Ms. Churchill's amendment to the original board directive. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, back. Now we have a new board directive that includes Ms. Churchill's amendment. Does anyone like to say anything else about it? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
I have a point of information.
Okay?
On my agenda item request for this meeting, I had asked that we address capacity issues. There's been talk about this with the passage of our.
Why don't you make a board directive, state it as a board directive, and we'll see if we get a second.
Well, I didn't request this as a board directive, I requested it as a discussion topic.
Well, as Dr. Baldwin said, this is something that we discuss every year, which will be coming up in May.
We get the report and we never really seem to do anything with it. And right now, we're instituting a new school. It seems that we need to look at this capacity report. Anytime we build a new school and we'll be renovating this building into a school, you should look at redrawing attendance lines.
And we will be looking at that in May. And you can certainly bring up your concerns at that time.
Okay.
Okay. All right, please note that our next board meeting will not be on the first Thursday in April due to where spring break falls. We will be meeting on the second Thursday, which is April the 11th at 6:30. And we will also be having a board work session on Friday, April the 5th at 9:30, was that? 9:30 to 12. The public is invited to attend, and at that work session, we'll be discussing the budget. So, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so do.
All in favor say aye.
I'd like to note that we have adjourned at 8:34 p.m. Would you please?